All right, let's talk about a feeling, a paradox, really, that I think a lot of us have experienced, but maybe couldn't quite put a name to. It's this. Why do the places we love to visit, the places we dream about, sometimes feel like they're falling apart the moment we get there?
You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You save up all year, you book the flights, you're picturing that perfect beach, and you arrive and the power's out, the Wi-Fi is a myth, and you're waiting in line for absolutely everything. You start to wonder, what is going on here? Well, I can tell you it isn't just bad luck. There are some powerful, hidden economic forces at play.
So to really get to the bottom of this, we need a good model, a case study. And the source material gives us the perfect one, a small island destination. Think of this little paradise as our own economic laboratory. It's a mostly closed system, so it's fantastic for seeing exactly how all these pressures interact.
Okay, so imagine this island. For most of the year, maybe 9 or 10 months, it's a pretty quiet, sleepy kind of place. But then the high season hits, and we're not talking about a small bump in visitors. Boom, the population triples. Almost overnight, you have 3 times the number of people, all demanding water, electricity, food, and just space.
And this is precisely where things start to creak and groan. That local water supply, which is perfectly adequate for the year-round residents, is suddenly pushed to its limit and starts to run dry. The power grid, which was never built for this kind of massive surge, starts to flicker and fail. This phenomenon has a name. It's the peak season bottleneck. And this is the absolute core of the problem we're talking about.
Now, for any business students out there, this slide is absolutely key. It gets to the fundamental difference between selling a product and selling an experience. If you run a car factory, you can build up inventory in the slow months to prepare for a busy season. You can stockpile. But in tourism, the product is perishable. A hotel can't sell last Tuesday's empty room today. You literally cannot store a sunset. If that experience isn't consumed in that exact moment, its value disappears. Forever. This is what makes the tourism industry so uniquely vulnerable to these huge spikes in demand. So, what's really causing these cracks in paradise? Well, the source material gives us a fantastic framework for understanding this. It breaks the problem down into 5 interconnected pillars of scarcity.
So here they are. We're going to walk through each one. Beachfront land, freshwater, skilled labor, the environment's carrying capacity, and finally, infrastructure. You're going to see how every single one of these puts a fundamental limit on a destination. Let's start with the most basic ones.
The first 2 pillars are what I like to call the finite foundations. We're talking about the literal ground and the water. These are the absolute, non-negotiable physical constraints of any given place. This quote from the source material just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly illustrates that first pillar. There is a fixed amount of coastline in the world. You can't just manufacture more of it. A hotel can't create a new ocean view. And in economics, when a desirable asset has a fixed supply and demand goes up, the price goes through the roof. This is the first and most obvious resource to become scarce. And then there's the second pillar, fresh water. You see these incredibly lush green resorts in places that are often quite dry. Well, where does that water come from? Usually it's being pulled from the exact same underground aquifer that the local farmers need to grow food and that the community needs for drinking water. You have a direct and often invisible competition for an essential, life-sustaining resource. It becomes a zero-sum game. Okay, so we've covered the hard physical limits. Now let's move on to what we can call the living resources, the people who create the experience and the natural world that the experience relies on. This is so critical. A destination might have plenty of people, but that's not what the tourism industry needs. It requires what the source calls service-minded labor. We're talking about human capital, people with specific training, with language skills, with a hospitality mindset. This pool of specialized talent is often surprisingly small, and it frequently becomes the real bottleneck that limits how much a resort area can actually grow. And then there's the resource we often take for granted until it's way too late: nature itself. Every ecosystem has what's known as a carrying capacity. Think of it as a tipping point. It's the maximum amount of human activity that an environment can handle before it stops being able to repair itself and just starts to degrade. The source gives this perfect, really stark example. A healthy coral reef might be able to handle, say, 50 divers a day without any long-term damage, but what happens when the 51st diver shows up, or the 100th, or the 200th? The very thing they all came to see, that beautiful, vibrant, living ecosystem, starts to be destroyed by their collective presence. The beauty itself is a scarce and tragically consumable resource.
And that brings us to our fifth and final pillar. This is the man-made system that we build to support everything else. This is the infrastructure. And this is often where you, the tourist, feel the breakdown most directly.
I mean, think about it. Roads only have so many lanes. Airports only have so many runways. Power plants can only generate so much electricity. These things are massive, expensive, long-term investments. And they're almost always designed for the average load, not the absolute peak demand.
So the crucial point is, when that population suddenly triples during the high season, the system just breaks. It can't cope. That's the traffic jam you sit in for 2 hours just to get from the airport. That's the island-wide blackout that happens right at dinner time. The destination has become a victim of its own success. Its popularity has outgrown its own skeleton, and the quality of the experience just plummets.
So let's bring all this together. The most important thing to realize is that these 5 pillars don't exist in a vacuum. They are all woven together in a very fragile system.
It's a domino effect. A lack of beachfront land, that's pillar 1, forces developers to build in more remote areas. Well, that strains the roads and the water table, that's pillars 5 and 2. The need for more staff runs up against the shortage of skilled labor, pillar 3, and the sheer number of people starts to overwhelm the local environment, pillar 4. One scarcity triggers another, and pretty soon you get that feeling that the whole place is, well, breaking.
And so this leaves us with a really challenging final question. We usually think of resources as physical things we can mine or grow. But what if the resource is the experience itself, the beauty, the culture, the simple feeling of a place? If that's the resource, then how do we stop ourselves from, quite literally, loving our favorite places to death? It's something to think about, not just when you're deciding where to go on vacation, but maybe more importantly, when.